Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results. Hi, I'm Perry Holly, a Maxwell Leadership Facilitator and Coach.
And I'm Chris Cody, Executive Vice President with Maxwell Leadership. Welcome and thank you for joining. Well, we're excited today for part 2 with Dr. Tim Elmore. I don't use the doctor often, but man, we need to, because the content that we're going to talk about is some tremendous research and some knowledge that we need to be learning.
So diagnosis and prescription.
That's right,
diagnosis
exactly.
and prescription.
That's
right.
Yeah.
And so at the end of our episode, we're going to let you know where that you can go and find out about an incredible assessment. Also, the brand new book that's out that we're excited about. In the meantime, if you have any questions about our conversation today, maybe you're even intrigued about, how do I bring this to my team? What does this look like? How do we have real conversations about different generations in our workforce? We want you to go to maxwellleadership.com/podcast, and there you can submit that form and our team will follow up with you. Well, as I mentioned, today we're going to talk about part 2, a new kind of diversity, generating competitive advantage through this diversity. And last episode, we talked high level, and we gave some thoughts and kind of some things that you've thought and worked through. Today we're going to give you a little bit more meat and some things that I think will even help you as you maybe evaluate what's going on inside your leadership team or inside your organization.
Well, I came out of the last episode, we talked about the X, the Y, the Z. I thought, wait a minute, I'm a baby boomer. Why don't we have a letter? Where did that go? How did baby boomers not get a letter?
As a fellow baby boomer, I think our letter should be A.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. We're certainly the first one in the line here.
Yeah.
So, no, it's cool. Well, let's talk about this. We have said already there's at least 5 generations that are working somewhere at some place. So the oldest that might still be in the workforce today is one called the Builder generation or the Silent generation. They were born between 1929 and 1945. They were called builders because they built so much out of so little. Very resourceful. My dad is a classic example. He just passed away at 90 years old in 2020. So he was born in 1930. The first decade of his life was the Great Depression.
Yeah.
And then the next 5 years, World War II. So frugal, grateful, conservative, and resourceful.
Haven't I heard you talk a little bit about that generation? When you go out to a restaurant, may grab a couple extra sweetened loaves or napkins or put them in the old purse. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
And we save the wrapping paper every Christmas because we'll use it next year.
That's
at
right.
holiday
That's right.
time.
But that's that generation.
My mom is constantly wiping off tinfoil and folding it
Yes.
back and putting it back.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
My mom, believe it or not, even though we weren't impoverished, we'd use our napkins at dinner time. She'd hang them on the clothesline.
Wow.
So we'd use them the next
Yeah.
meal. That's just
It's
how
their
I was
generation.
raised. Now, let me just say this. These people, when they're still around, now they're past retirement age, but they might still be doing maintenance around. They might still be leading the organization. They could be doing lawn care, but they bring a fierce loyalty and sage wisdom. It's that timeless stuff like discipline and work ethic. We kind of miss those today sometimes.
Yes.
So I love the contribution. May we find it again, in today's workers. Yeah. The next would be the baby boomers. Perry, that's you and I. Boomers were called baby boomers because we were born between 1946 and 1964. We were called boomers because there was a boom of babies right after the soldiers got home from World War II. Almost around the world because it was a world war. So this was a global boom. And in America, it was 76.4 million children born in 18 years. So because we were big, everybody paid attention to us. We were large and in charge. Things were expanding, not recessing. It was not a Great Depression. It was a great expansion. So we felt large and in charge. Now, boomers today bring stories, life coaching, just good wisdom and experience to the team. And I think we need to say, boomers, before you leave, coach us.
Yeah.
Talk about what you've picked up. John Maxwell's a baby boomer. I learn from him every time he opens his mouth. Yeah. And part of it is just the decades of wisdom he's collected.
Yeah, I like what you just said right there about the wisdom that men and women inside your team, inside your organization, that may be on their way out, close to retirement. There is so much organizational Sometimes maybe even they know where all the dead bodies are buried,
That's
right?
right, yeah.
But things that can make you as an organization more effective, more efficient, and so leverage that knowledge by asking to be coached or by asking them to coach. Because I think you hit on a key right there, that we talk a lot about developing people, and there's so much wisdom and knowledge in that generation. Don't miss that.
In fact, when they leave, if we've not done that, it will be like a wing of the library just burned down.
Yes.
And we've lost that knowledge and information. So that's the boomers. Next come the baby busters, or what's also called Generation X. Chris, your generation was first called baby buster because the generation started with the launch of the birth control pill. So it was a bust, not a boom. It went way down from 76 million to like 49 million.
Wow.
That's measurable.
Yes.
So eventually you were called Generation X because your generation did not want to be stereotyped with a name, and so you became the X generation. Nothing. I don't want to be called anything. So along the way, right now you're in the throes of your career. Xers really are the heart and soul of the workforce right now. And because you were often a latchkey generation, maybe not you, but a lot of kids, both parents were working or dad left, maybe. And so the kid was coming home to an empty home, figuring it out. So Xers grew up pretty resourceful, pretty much, I'll figure this out on my own, that sort of thing. And that's good. We need to leverage that. They learned it at 16.
Yeah.
So I would say they are a little bit more cynical than other generations because of, don't tell me life's wonderful. It's not wonderful. Keep it real.
Yeah, that's good.
But I think Xers bring pragmatic insights
That's what I was thinking.
to the workforce,
Problem solvers.
contrarian thoughts, because they don't just see everything's rainbows and sunshine. I think this is helpful. Wouldn't you agree? You need optimists, of course, but you need the person that says, well, if it went wrong, what are we going to do?
That's right.
And Xers often figure that out.
I think you do that a lot. You offer a problem-solving approach to nothing's impossible. You can figure it out, but it's very practical. I didn't think about it when you said that. Very practical approach to solving
No doubt
things.
about it. I love the Xers on our team. Okay, the next batch would be the Millennials, who I've joked before about how we've thrown them under the bus for 10 to 15 years. Millennials listening, please forgive us. We know not what we do. But
I think we should point out that the people recording this have already threatened to cut us off. They're Millennials, and they've got control of us.
That's exactly right. So I've actually had bosses or employers say, I don't know if I can understand these Millennials. I'm going to wait for the next one. We can't wait. The Millennials are now the largest population in the workforce today, over 50%. Depending on the industry, it may be more than that. But the Millennials are the largest generation in American history, 80 million strong.
Do they make up most of the leadership now? Are they in the leadership positions?
I'd have to look at the data. I don't know if they're all the leaders, but more and more they're becoming the managers and the leaders. So
they're up and coming.
People listening might be going, I'm 35 and I'm leading this team, and oh my gosh, some are older. By the way, I hear Millennials say all the time, I need help. I've got older people that I'm managing, and they're like my parents' age, and I feel awkward. It can feel awkward. I remember early on in my career managing people that were older, and I wanted to say, please forgive me. I'm telling you what to do, but you could spank me. I mean, not literally, but you know what I'm saying. That was probably an inappropriate comment to make. But Millennials, oh my gosh. One of the reasons they feel audacious and confident is they were the generation that grew up with trophies just for participation, and we told them they were awesome for putting the spoon in the dishwasher, and that was our bad, not theirs. But listen to what they bring. They bring energy to a team. They bring socialness to the team. Very, very social generation. They bring a love of family to a team. It's just when I look to our Millennials, they often are the ones with the ideals, like they love our mission, and they will remind others. And I go, I'm so glad you're here at 29 to remind us we're not here to make widgets. We're here to train a generation of leaders. So it's just good, and I really love them. The next generation and the last one in the workforce would be Generation Z, following Generation Y, or the Millennials. They're sometimes called the Homelanders, but one historian calls them the Homelanders because their generation started at about the same time as the Department of Homeland Security.
Wow.
Oh, wow. So 2001. Think about the last 20 years.
Of what they've been through.
Yes.
Yeah.
Terrorism, corporate scandals with Enron, Tyco, WorldCom, starting about the time they started. Mass shootings, school shootings is on the rise.
Yeah.
We've actually had more mass shootings today, this year, that we've had days in the year. So a mama sending her 12-year-old off to school can go, I just know a bullet's going to be flying in the cafeteria. Now, it won't be probably, but it's just a scary, scary time.
Very real.
But when they come into the workforce, let me tell you what we've noticed from Gen Z young team members. They bring a very savvy hacker mindset, not just with technology. They get behind the system to find out how it works, and they bring an entrepreneurial spirit. So 72% of high school students today plan to be an entrepreneur.
Wow.
They don't want to join something, want to start something. Well, if we can be an environment where they go, if you join us, you'll feel like an entrepreneur, we'll have them.
Yeah.
We'll win them at the heart level and say, I want to be here. I think we need to start internal gig economies inside our business where they can feel like they can do gigs and do new things all the time. So that's what I think they bring, and we need to capitalize on that.
If you did not take a ton of notes during that section right there, I'm going to encourage you to go back and listen to it again and take notes, because that was a wealth of foundational knowledge when it comes to knowing your team and understanding them. And what I love about it is that there are leaders right now in organizations, maybe even in your organization, that are in multiple levels of these generations and may or may not have been developed, may or may not have some leadership training. And so it's going to be our responsibility to equip them. And the majority of what I'm hearing from you, the majority of the people that are in the workforce, it is more than just a paycheck to them.
Yeah, yes.
Different generations, but
It's purpose-driven.
yeah. And so what does that mean? That means that if you want to keep your turnover down, if you want to keep your engagement level high, you better make sure that you're driving them with multiple reasons of why they need to stay inside your organization, so that you have an engaged team member, so that they're not running over, because they won't leave for just another $1 or $2, right? If you're giving them 4 or 5 other reasons, you're developing them, it's tied to the mission and to the purpose. And
Well, I just love this too, is thinking about as a leader of an organization, I'm a manager or I'm an executive, and I'm looking on either side. You said this last week about get to know the generations on either side of you, but what you just gave us, a little summary there, says what do I need to be thinking about to leverage, one, to help the business, but two, to really, as you're thinking, to feed that purpose of those individuals. I just love that, to think, as I mentioned, I've always thought about how to tolerate the generation. No, I should be investing in knowing this. This is why this book's so valuable. And you said it's a dictionary and an encyclopedia. It helps me understand it, but also it gives me a plan to help me deal with these individual generations. So.
Hey, podcast listeners. Do you have a clear plan for growth? Achieving big results most often does not require big life changes. Small improvements over time compound into big results. Download the Maxwell Leadership app. It's the new free app where our expert guides and John Maxwell help you pace your leadership journey and set a clear plan for your own personal growth. You can also find all sorts of resources on the Maxwell Leadership app, including this podcast, information on upcoming events, and much more. Just search Maxwell Leadership in your app store and download the app today.
well, in the book, you actually talk about how there can be, well, maybe I shouldn't use the word can. There's going to be conflict.
Yes.
Right? Between the generations. Talk a little bit about, for leaders that are listening, how can you be flexible to what you're hearing?
Yes.
And still lead from a point where you don't feel like you're giving in to the individual. Talk a little bit about that.
Okay. I'll try to do the Reader's Digest version of this answer.
All right.
First of all, I have begun to notice, really over the last 3 decades, each new generation brings unique preferences, expectations, and demands. And I think, number one, employers need to understand how to help them distinguish between demands and preferences.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
There's a difference.
If you prefer communication to be on text message, but it's not a demand, okay, just know it's not a demand.
Yeah.
If you're going to quit over that, maybe you ought to find another job.
Yes.
Yes. So I talk about those differences. I really do believe in many ways life is about managing expectations. I've often thought, if I tell my wife, for instance, I'll be home at 7, and I get home at 7:05, not a big deal. I get home at 9:05, we have a little conversation. Because
you can have a leadership conversation.
That's right. Yes, exactly.
And it's going to be one way.
So conflict expands based on the separation between expectation and reality.
I love it.
So let me just give you one example. I talked to a person recently. Tattoos and body piercings have become an issue in some, especially retail, so where the management said, that's not the image we want to show to a customer. Well, I tell the story in the book about Maggie and Antonio. Maggie is the hiring manager at a quick service restaurant. Antonio interviewed. He seemed to be a great guy. he had a tattoo, but he had it covered up on his shirt, his long sleeve shirt, in the interview. Well, later he's wearing a short sleeve shirt and she sees this big tattoo. Well, she sees it differently than he does. She sees it, you violated, why didn't you tell me? He goes, this is a part of who I am. You're questioning my identity. And in essence, I'm summarizing too quickly here, but it became they began to butt heads. I'm so glad for Maggie's wisdom, and she said, let's keep meeting until we come to a resolution, because she didn't want to lose him. He was a good worker, but he wasn't honest with her.
Yeah.
And she knew if I just say, no big deal, keep your tattoo, everybody else is going to go on, seriously, you're just going to let that go? Great, we're all getting our tats real quick, you know.
Yeah.
So here's what she eventually did. She eventually met, meeting number 4, I think, and said, Antonio, I don't want to lose you, but we're going to have to talk to the team, because if you stay on the team, we're going to have a way of doing this. Here's what she did. She said, team, I want you to hear from Antonio on this in just a minute, but I don't want to lose him. Do you? No. We're going to have him cover his tattoo, but we all know it's there. Just know he's going to wear long sleeve shirts so he doesn't violate the brand that we have. You know he's a good worker, so do I. I'm going to call corporate and see if they might reconsider that policy, but until then, that's how we're going to do it.
Great.
Everybody cheered, because they were all thinking, how are you going to do this? Maggie took a very difficult situation, found out what's a preference, what's an expectation, and was able to navigate keeping a good worker and not losing.
That's a fantastic illustration.
How would you recommend I love this about expectations. I'm thinking a coaching client I picked up recently, almost 100% millennial.
Yeah.
And I sent a meeting request with a Zoom link, and they quickly sent back, we don't really do email.
Yeah.
I said,
you said what?
What? Are you allowed? Is that allowed? You don't do email? He goes, could you send it in a text? And I'm thinking, I don't really know how to send a Zoom link in a text, but I'm going to figure it out, because that was a preference that they had. But I'm fascinated by that. How do we get preferences? Should we be actively, intentionally seeking preferences and expectations from people? As a leader, would I be polling my team? How would I?
I think in some teams it's totally fine to do that. In fact, they feel heard if you do. Yeah. I feel like minimally employers need to say it right up front when the hire is just made and there's no history yet. Say, here's a norm for communication. Does that work for you? Here's a norm for meetings and decision-making rights. A lot of times a 23-year-old can come in and go, great, no. You're going to weigh in, but you're not going to make the final decision. Those kinds of things that we didn't have to talk about 40 years ago, we need to talk about. That's what I would say. Talk about norms and make sure they're all on board, so that when decisions are made or communication is done, they say, I can do that.
This group shows up 100% through a text, and then somehow it gets to their calendar. It doesn't, but I had to learn how to do it, and it works fantastic.
Yeah.
There's some other groups, if I send them a text about a call, we'd never see them.
Yeah, that's right.
So you need to know these things.
It's exactly right.
So there's a chapter in the book, and it's going to be my question. The chapter is called, What Makes This So Hard? Tim, my question for you is, what makes this so hard?
You got an hour? Yeah. Well, a couple things. One, I feel as though because generations come in almost like a cross-cultural relationship where I've flown to another country and there's two different sets of customs and values, that we need to meet in the middle and understand. I think in that chapter I talk about our scene today. And it's actually one of my favorite parts of the book. I take the word scene, S-C-E-N-E, and I put it on a left column. And then the right-hand column, I talk about the unintended consequences to that scenario. So the letter S, we live in a world of speed. Consequently, we may think slow is bad. Well, you and I both know some things happen very slowly. Marriages don't happen quickly, good marriages. The letter C in scene. We live in a world of convenience. Our kids grew up with conveniences we never had. You know what they can assume, unfortunately? Hard is bad. Well, some things are really hard. The letter E, we live in a world of entertainment that's in our hand right now. So we're overstimulated. I can think boring is bad. Well, I always tell teenagers when I talk to them, I didn't like boring when I was 16. But here's what we know now that we didn't know then. Neuroscientists tell us today our brains actually need boredom.
That's right.
They say it's in times of boredom that we develop empathy and creativity. Two really crucial things for people work. But we have stimulation. The letter N, we live in a world of nurture. We have nurtured these young people, rightfully so. Mamas didn't want them to skin their knee, And I don't know why I wave my hands when I say that, but sometimes that creates risk is bad.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, our nation was built on risk.
Yeah.
And then lastly, the last letter E. I'm going to sound like your grandpa now. We live in a world of entitlement. We feel entitled to things that past generations worked for.
Yeah.
If I grow up in a world of entitlement, I can assume that labor is bad. I shouldn't have to work for this.
Yeah.
Scholarship at this D1 school. No, you're going to have to work. So what I say in this chapter is we're all this way.
No doubt.
None of us are super patient. None of us are, like inconveniences. But if we can have a conversation about that, I would even say steal that and put it on a whiteboard and say, let's talk.
Yeah.
But that's what I think. I guess what I'm saying is I think the very technology that we love has also made it harder for us to do the hard relationship stuff we got to do. Wow.
I think what's interesting about that, it's fascinating, is that you could listen to that and go, well, yeah, that's exactly what that generation is like. What I want you to be aware of as a leader is that what Tim just laid out for us is in every generation, right? Like we look at different generations and say that about them. So it's not just us looking at the millennials and saying that, right? Or me looking at your older generation and saying that. But it's that we need to be aware of this is happening in every generation's using that acronym.
That's right.
Did you not hear him say that the baby boomer was the best generation?
I didn't. So, okay, this generation that I'm about to bring up, this may be at least I like the name of it the best. And at the end of the book, you talk about this alpha generation. What is that? What do we need to know about that?
Yeah, well, the alpha generation is the youngest generation of kids that we're measuring today. The data is really fresh and new, and really, I would say it's in pencil.
Not in the workforce yet.
That's right, not in the workforce yet. They're children. They're elementary school kids.
But
here's what I love. When I look at the data so far, this generation is showing up in lag time studies more empathetic than the previous 3 generations at their age.
Wow.
Well, I think it's because they're exposed to the war in Ukraine at 7 and so they're but I love that. Maybe this is a generation that grows up more empathetic, but here's what I love the most. I believe hard times create strong generations. Strong generations create good times. Good times create weak generations, which in turn create hard times.
Yeah,
it's a cycle.
It's a cycle. Yeah.
But think about the alphas and Gen Z. They're growing up in hard times.
Yeah.
You know, the pandemic, the economy, the roaring 20s. If you look at the 2 generations that began the 20th century and the 2 generations that began the 21st century, alphas and Gen Z, so many similarities.
Yeah.
History didn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme.
Yeah.
These kids could be
awesome.
the strong. Your granddaughter could be among the strongest. Maybe they're looking back saying, we're stronger than those millennials. We're stronger than those Xers because we had such a difficult. But mom and dad and bosses need to lead them well and say, this could be a fitness center for you right now as you grow up.
Yeah. I love as you closed with that last illustration, you mentioned, hey, mom and dad.
Yeah.
This is an executive leadership podcast where you're leading teams and it's organizational health and culture. But this content is just as relevant for you inside the home.
I think,
and or more. Yeah. We were talking about it before we went live on one of our sessions about, the conversations with parents around different generations really get personal. They really get heated. And it's because it's your precious commodity, your children. And so absolutely love the content of this book. It will make us better leaders. It will improve the culture of your organization. We talk about the fact that we oftentimes have diverse teams. We need more diversity. Yeah. What we don't do a good job of is inclusively leading people. Yeah. And we brought on, we developed people for a reason on our team, and then we tend to forget why that was. Mm-hmm. And we tend to try to get them to fit into a mold, or we want to do this versus letting them be maybe with a tattoo on their arm, to your point, but an incredible worker who just oozes the culture and everything that you wanted to know. That was a fascinating conversation. So I challenge you, as I wrap up in this call to action, is you may be having some of those thoughts about some of the people on your team. You may be challenged with different generations. This content will set you free, if I could say it that way, as a leader. And I think oftentimes as a leader, we're looking for stuff like that. So your call to action is this. I want you to get this book. And not only that, but we've also developed an assessment for you. And I was joking the first episode about it being a GQ assessment. And Tim was proud of me that I even jumped in there, maybe had a little swag when I said that. But it's a generational quotient assessment that we want you to take. And then if you'll visit newdiversitybook.com, You'll be able to order the book there. You'll be able to take the free assessment and be able to gather more information that will make you a more effective leader.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Chris. And thank you, Tim,
Yeah,
for being
thank
with
you,
us. 2
Tim.
episodes was
Appreciate it.
fantastic. I learned a lot. I will put the summary of the generations in the learner guide. You can find that, more information about our offerings, and leave a question or a comment for us, all that at maxwellleadership.com/podcast. We love hearing from you, and we're very grateful that you would spend this time with us. That's all today for the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast.